managed to lose my own. So I'm just trying to reorientate myself. Sorry, colleagues. It's I've been off for a few days. I've then obviously with the lockdown coming on. You may recollect that the organisation I'm part of ran Birmingham's Food Relief last time. So we've had a few scary discussions over the last couple of days. So my attention's more on how we're going to heat people's homes and how we're going to actually get people to be able to eat in the next month. Okay, Tim, you're flashing. Any particular reason?
No. No, Chair. No, I don't know why it's flashing. Sorry.
Okay. So, okay, let's make a start. And Bob, I noticed that you want to speak in relation to the minutes on the Q&A, and I will come. If I don't call you in at that point, please just interrupt me. Okay, let's make a start. Apologies for absence. Do we have any, Tanya?
Yes, Chair. We've received 3 apologies. Councillor Dean Carroll, Councillor Lucy Seymour-Smith and Mike Lyons, and I can confirm that you're not correct.
Thank you very much. I kind of work on that principle now. Okay, colleagues. Do we have any declarations of interest in the room? Steve?
Yeah, because we'll be discussing finances later on. Everything in my portfolio I'll brief at the Cabinet for regeneration. There'll be cross points where we've got, bids in and we've got money coming from the Combined Authority, brownfield. So just to flag that up, be part of my portfolio brief.
Thanks for that, Steve.
Clear of that.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, if we can move on to minutes, if we go for matters of accuracy, and then we'll go for matters arising on each set. Okay, so if we go for the 7th of September first, page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4. Okay. Those seem to be a true and accurate record. Yep. Okay. If we could now go for the minutes of the Q&A session on the 16th of October, page 5 on the order papers, but page 1 of 4. Page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4. Can we take those as an accurate record?
Yeah, interrupt, please.
Councillor Grinsell, did you want to raise a matter of accuracy or
on the draft minutes?
Yeah.
I'm a very sad person, and I reviewed the YouTube video on a number of occasions now. I personally do not consider the draft minutes are an accurate or a true reflection of the meeting. Reasons being, under members present, both Councillor Phil Bateman and Councillor Jackie Taylor are not shown as being present, yet in the minutes, Councillor Bateman is noted as having made a declaration, as did Councillor Taylor. Councillor Taylor also asked a specific question of the Mayor. In terms of questions to the Mayor...
Hang on, Councillor Grinsell, can you just slow down a minute? Certainly, Jackie Taylor and Phil Bateman are noted as in attendance.
Not on the sheets that I've got in terms of present for that particular date. But
no, you have present.
Chairman, I'll move on.
Excuse me, Councillor
Grinsell. That's neither here nor there, frankly.
And Councillor Grinsell.
Please, could you let me finish, Chair?
No. Please, can I just also, please, can you note, I am not a chairman. I'm a chair. Thank you. Okay.
Apologies.
Right. So you have a concern.
The Mayor, I personally asked the question of the Mayor in respect to the benefits to the Combined Authority in respect to HS2 and UK Central. The Mayor responded to that fully. It's not noted. A question was made and answered by Councillor Peter Taylor in regard to the Combined Authority Recovery Plan. Again, that's not noted. A further 2 questions were asked by Councillor Simpkins. One is noted, the second is not, because he asked questions about joblessness, training and skills. I would like the Governance Services Officer to note my comments and the minutes reflect my concerns, please. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for that, Councillor Grinsell. And clearly it is important that the minutes reflect the meeting, which is a concern for us all. I do note that there are absent of questions from people I know. Tim, Lindsay, do either of you wish to comment? Dan? I've got both Tim and Dan. So.
Yeah, Chair, thank you. And yeah, happy to review the minutes again. I mean, I know we always say that the minutes are not a complete verbatim record of absolutely everything that happens in a 2-hour meeting. Obviously, we seek to capture the important matters that are raised. If we've omitted something, then obviously happy for that to be picked up as part of this process. So we will review it again and come back.
Yeah. Okay. It was clearly a very full meeting, and again, I'm keen that we don't have a verbatim record, but we should at least note where members have asked questions and if there's been a response, I guess. Dan, did you want to add anything before I invite Councillor Steve Simpkins? Okay. Councillor Simpkins, and then I want to draw this to a close.
Yeah. This just highlights the problem that we've got with governance and not being quorate. Also, there's some big issues with regards to the last meeting question time with the mayor, with regards to the information about unemployment, the way that he's going to roll out grants and we've got to keep bidding is going to slow things up. It all needs to be captured so as it's on the record. Yes, I understand we don't need it verbatim, but key issues, especially unemployment and the money that's being invested around not just the Black Country and Birmingham, but the wider conurbation with regards to the West Mids. Don't forget we've got Shire members as well who benefit from some of the investment that comes forward from the Metro Mayor, and it seems to be lacking in answering most of these questions. So these need to be on the record, to be fair, and I'll trust your chairship with regards to getting that rectified. But my biggest issue is the governance procedures. We've talked about this for at least 6 years. There are now 2, and it's still unresolved.
Okay, so I'm with the senior leadership team later on this week talking about governance and the governance review that we held earlier, and certainly I can reflect some of the concerns. Clearly the minutes can only really highlight the depth of the questions asked. So if we don't have detailed questions coming from the non-constituent authorities, we can't necessarily flesh that out. And I think in the budget workshop, what we should do is have a very clear view as to what is the span, the breadth and depth of the questions we wish to put to the mayor, so that we actually ensure we do get the balance between the constituent and non-constituent authorities, and so we can best understand the way the budget's doing. What I will do is, I think we will refer back the minutes of the 16th of October, if that's okay with the committee, for a further review in light of the questions raised by Councillor Grinsell. And apart from that, the matters arising we do need to consider at the end of the meeting in terms of looking at any recommendations that might be coming from the Mayor's questions, but let's see where we are at the end of this meeting. We might have to do that through note format. Can I take, we've accepted that the 7th of September was an accurate record. Was there any matter arising on the 7th of September? No. And taking into account that there is a desire to actually just review that we've picked up on the principal questions and answers, will that fulfil your concerns, Councillor Greensill?
Yes, it would, but obviously I cannot vote to approve the minutes as they stand.
No, I'm not asking. I've already said, Councillor Greensill, that I will refer the minutes back, and I accept we need to check that the principal questions and matters are covered. But what I would say is one thing, just to reference since he's on the call today, is congratulations to Richard in person, because we did raise it in under the minutes last time in terms of his elevation to cabinet. I'm sure being finance cabinet member in a period of additional resource tensions is a great timing. Okay, we will recirculate then the minutes. They have to be approved by the Combined Authority Board anyway. They have to go to the Combined Authority Board because we weren't quorate. Can I ask if any member has a specific concern with the minutes when they come back through? Can you please put in writing to Tim and myself any of those concerns so we can then pick them up? Is that acceptable? Okay, thank you very much. Colleagues, you have also had circulated the economic tracker as currently is that we requested at the September 7th meeting. This is the tracker that shows out of the 3.2 billion ask of government, 173.2 million has been secured, of which 66 million is from the Getting Britain Building Fund. So I'm asking for comments, not on whether it's great or not, whether we got the money. I'm looking at it purely from a process point of view. It took me quite a bit of reading to truly pick up what was real, what was hoped for. I really appreciate Julie has already asked to meet with me. So if you've got any comments on the tracker, can you please get those to me and Lindsay by the end of the week? And then what I will do is with Kathy actually seek to have a meeting with Julie so we can just get the tracker serving a useful purpose for all of us. Okay, you will have also had circulated, in my mind it was last night, but it could have been some other time. Last night was the first time I managed to get onto Wi-Fi properly for a while. The annual plan, which is part of the performance review. Again, can we ask that members review that and come back to Lindsay and Tanya with either no comment or any comments that you would wish to make. What I want to ensure is that we have all observed that performance report and reflected if there's any matters arising. Is that okay with members of the committee? Julia?
Yeah, I just wanted to flag the timing. So it's a draft copy of the report that's due to go to board on the 13th of November that provides a 6-month review of delivery on the annual plan. Dan and Tim may be able to confirm, but my understanding is that board papers will be circulated at the end of this week. So if people have comments, in order for us to be able to factor them into any finalised drafting ahead of it going to board, it will be the sooner the better, please.
Okay, can I just be clear when members of my committee actually receive the papers?
My understanding, well, I was on leave last week, but my understanding was that it was shared early last week.
I don't know. It came out in an email. Tanya, when did it come out?
Yes, Chair, it went out to members on Thursday morning.
Right. Okay. So Thursday morning. I think it's reasonable to give members of the committee till at least close of play Wednesday, Julie, if that's okay with you.
Thank you. That'd be much appreciated.
Okay. Colleagues, note that we are, sorry, Julia, note we are going to have to look at those in a tighter time scale than we banked on. Okay, Councillor Simpkins.
Yeah, Chair, I think what would be useful for future documents of this is what the spend is by each authority. There's 7 Mets. We ought to know what's being spent in each council authority. That would be really easy to get a broader picture of how fair the distribution of investment and resources comes across the West Midlands, and the projections of what it's supposed to achieve with regards to this investment. Then we can go back and tell our colleagues and also the residents in each authority area how well the combined authority is or isn't doing.
Okay, Steve, is that the tracker or is that the annual plan? Is that
the annual plan? The annual
okay,
plan.
cool. Okay.
Because
okay.
we could have quarterly updates on that by authority.
Okay. I have to confess I didn't get as far as the annual plan. I was too busy looking at housing numbers. Okay.
Started the other way around.
Councillor Fowler.
Thank you, Chair. I'd agree with what Councillor Simpkins has said. In fact, I think I did ask something similar before because I said it would be helpful to find out what Wolverhampton and others are spend on each area, and including the areas that Councillor Simpkin, so we can see how it's shared in equilibrium. So that I welcome what Stephen has said there.
Thank you, very helpful. Okay, so we've already provided Julia you some initial comment, and if I can ask members to read and feed that back. Okay, let me get back to my agenda. I believe we are now on to item 5. And I'd like to welcome to our meeting Councillor Mike Bird, and I believe Gareth is supporting him.
Yes, I am, Chair. Thanks very much.
Okay. Mike, Gareth, are you wanting to say a few words, or as a sort of point of introduction, or shall we go straight into questions?
Well, I think I'd like to give an outline as to where we are, Madam Chairman, and that's really from a housing and land perspective. I've just heard quite rightly that members asking how the money's been spent. Well, I can report from a housing and land board, I think we are probably certainly the favourites of government at the moment, because we are exceeding all targets. The West Midlands is well ahead of the trajectory of the 215,000 homes in the housing deal. And to date, we've delivered 16,928 new homes in 2019. We have got a trajectory of 8,000 homes target of the £100 million land fund, and we will exceed the housing starts set by government on land fund sites in 2021 and 2022. We've deployed the first 2 tranches of the land fund, which is £53 million, directly acquiring, assembling and remediating land where there's a clear market failure, and in doing so unlocked 4,466 new homes on brownfield sites, following the combined authorities' policy of brownfield first. And this meets the BCR requirements. You go on to say that the West Midlands has secured additional benefits through its landmark new single commissioning framework, and as such, 20% affordable housing are incorporated into all housing developments. We are also saying to developers that we want to see advanced methods of construction being used, which then gives us not only the benefits of better quality homes, but also gives us the opportunity to make those energy efficient and, wherever possible, at this point in time, zero carbon. We have forged new partnerships with people such as Urban Splash, who are doing a substantial development in Birmingham around Icknield Port. And if you do get time to get out, and I know we can't at the moment, that is certainly a development that is well worth seeing. They are certainly well in the field of advanced manufacturing, and the properties they are producing are certainly at first rate. The £350 million investment committed by government at the time of March 2018 housing deal to support this housing delivery has given us so far £53 million has been provided through the Housing Land Fund, and £165 million has been used for the regeneration of the Perry-Barr region, which of course I'm sure you all are well aware of. So in real terms, we, I believe, certainly as the Housing and Land Board, are ahead of our game, but we are dependent upon outputs. If outputs are the benchmark that the government uses to provide us with more money, then effectively I think we should be top of the list to achieve that. And as a result, I think that's just some headline figures which you may wish to consider.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm going to touch back on some of the figures that you referenced, because I think for members of the committee, they're keen to understand the brownfield funding and the totality, because I think there's something like £234 million overall coming through in terms of brownfield, and I think we are curious as to how much has actually been spent, and actually how many housing units now exist for people to live in on the back of that brownfield funding. What I suppose I'm also keen to ensure we pull out of this session is the context in which we're operating in this region. Clearly, the government may be seeking numbers. I believe, given the level of housing need in our region, we are actually looking for housing that is responsive to the need and requirement of our region. And I've not been able to gain from officers the full breakdown, but where I went through various documents last night, we have something in approaching 100,000 people in our region on a waiting list, and that is a waiting list, the waiting list for housing, which has been since certainly Birmingham's has been pruned down significantly. So an absolute minimum housing need of about 100,000. We have some 8,000 to 10,000 families in temporary housing. And I think members of this committee will have heard me talk about the previous lockdown, where my sheer horror of one Sunday afternoon finding 155 children in a bed and breakfast hotel on the Hagley Road, having been placed by a number of authorities from this region, with no means of cooking, no means of education, no nothing. So I'm keen today that we focus on the need and the need that's coming through. In doing that, acceleration of the supply of housing is clearly critical, and I'm interested to know where we've got to in terms of modular, because indeed this is an area of expertise for this region. And I suppose I'm curious as to why aren't we commissioning directly factories to build these houses? We must be spending across the authorities thousands and thousands, millions in fact, on bed and breakfast accommodation. You know, we could have bought several factories 3 times over by now and actually got those homes up, because again, the beauty of modular is how quickly those homes go up. So I would be grateful for some initial reflection on how do our housing numbers actually reflect the need that is exhibiting in the region? What have we actually bought from the brownfield development? How many actual units are there? You reference Urban Splash, which is a truly lovely development, and any development that cranes in a great massive narrowboat into Birmingham, you know, is clearly seeking a marketing opportunity. The disconnect of that Urban Splash development from the sheer poverty and deprivation of Ladywood around it is a deep concern for a number of us. You know, how are we relating that through? So if we can first of all just focus on, maybe Gareth can come back, or yourself, Mike, brownfield numbers, and for you to reflect, really, I want you to reflect on, given the sheer level of need and homelessness in our region, not to mention in areas like Birmingham and Sandwell, massive overcrowding, what is the combined authority buying for its money to address that? Then can we move on to the supply chain and where we're going with modular? And I would like to then come back a little bit on the briefing note that Gareth circulated. I'd just like confirmation on, was that 2019, 2020 figures? Because I think, Councillor Bird, you're referencing 2018, 2019 figures. And if you look at where we are on 2019 and 2020 figures, we're actually way off our trajectory of meeting 215,000 units by 2030. And if you combine what went to the Housing Planning Board in January in terms of the actual breakdown of social housing, affordable rent, and compare that to the figures that Gareth circulated to us, there is no way at most, out of those 100,000 people on the waiting list, some 32,000 are going to get some housing in the next 10 years, which is whole generations are going to be left to not having their housing need addressed. So, which again brings me full circle back to, what is the brownfield doing in terms of acceleration? What are we doing in terms of modular to accelerate the housing supply? Because again, one of the things this committee keeps on saying is we can't keep on using old tools that have created our housing crisis to address our housing crisis. I don't know if Gareth, Councillor Bird, wants to come back on that.
Many questions there. The first question you asked, and the answer is 4,466 in relation to brownfield site.
Actual units, are those units in occupation now?
I really don't know. At the end of the day, I can only give you the figures that have been built out. Whether they're occupied is a matter for the person who's building them.
For occupation, because there is a big difference, as you know, Councillor Bird, in a development process. A development process can be 3 to 5 years in the making. So in many ways, the 2018-19 figures potentially related as much to what was going on in 2013 and 2014 as anything that's been going on since. What I'm keen to see is what of the specific interventions in the use of the brownfield grant actually done.
Well, what it's done is what it was meant to do, and that is to unlock sites that would normally not be built out because they are unviable. Now, as a result, we can only give the money on application by developers who then give us their best case scenario, and their profile spend is indicated within that application. So if it is a 2 or 3 year build out program, that's actually within the profile spend. And that's some of the considerations that are given when, in actual fact, any application is made for brownfield land funding. It is fair to say that I can only speak mainly for the Black Country, but obviously the port scheme is one that you quite rightly point out is now brought back into what was a very derelict area. I grew up in Birmingham, in Hockley, and spent most of my younger life in Ladywood, so I'm pretty well aware of what's gone on there and what continues to be the issue. Having said that, we are in the hands of people like housing associations, and we are talking to housing associations to come together so we can in actual fact have a bigger critical mass, and by having that critical mass we can actually looking to drive down the prices for modular build. I can't comment as to the commercial aspect of putting a factory up and building commercial properties. Get the feedback now. Commercial units which house advanced manufacturing. What I do know is this, and I said this only this morning in a leaders meeting. Now, that is to say that with the loss of employment, which we will see following this pandemic or whenever we see an end to it, then it would be, I hope, part of the skills gap and fill that skills gap would be to move people into the advanced manufacturing field and be trained quite quickly so they get back into employment. I think there are one or two major players in the house building in factories, if that's a word, advanced manufacturing. And what we've got to do is encourage a factory or a large factory to be based in the West Midlands. We have one in Aldridge, which belongs to Accord Housing, which I was instrumental in setting up probably 5 or 6 years ago now. And that tends to concentrate on timber frame. But there are more and more methods of construction coming through. But I think what we need to do is to have that critical mass to enable us to see a manufacturing base in the West Midlands, wherever that may be, to actually take up the slack in the workforce that we will see.
Mike, do you want me to just add in?
Please do, Gary.
Some examples, Chair, because I think one of the things we've always been focused on, and when we were given the funding by government, it was very clear that this funding, the £100 million brownfield funding provided by the housing deal in March 2018, agreed between the combined authority and government, was to unlock sites, particularly brownfield sites.
Gareth, can we just be clear? The 100 million, you've got 100. I appreciate you live with this day in, day out. We don't. There is 100 million through the housing deal. Then I understand there's 50 million through the brownfield land and property, and then an 84 million pound through the brownfield housing fund. In real terms, how much of that is cash in the bank?
Yeah.
In real terms, how much have we actually spent? In real terms, how many people have got a home today through investment from that fund?
Okay, so first of all, the £100 million housing deal land fund is paid in tranches. It's paid on performance, and thus far we've secured £53 million of that £100 million, and we're expecting the next payment very shortly. And of that 53 million, we have deployed nearly all of that 53 million pounds funding, as we're required to do, ready for the next payment. On the 84 million, we haven't received that yet. That was only recently announced by the Chancellor as part of the 400 million pound package. We're expecting that very soon, and we'll be ready to deploy that on schemes. On the 50 million pound brownfield land and property development fund, as reported to Investment Board, the majority of that has now been deployed. There is some spare capacity within that fund to move in. And then we've also got 2 loan funds, which is a residential investment fund which is up to 70 million pounds, and a commercial investment fund of up to 140 million pounds. So those are the main funds that we deploy. And with the land fund, which is the 53 million pounds of the 100 million pound we've received thus far, the sorts of schemes that we have unlocked are Cable Street in Wolverhampton, where the homes are being built and they're being sold at the moment to local people. So 151 homes are being built at Cable Street in Wolverhampton. Harvest Time in Walsall, where they're on site now, 88 homes. Caparo in Walsall, where they're on site now, 252 homes being built there. Icknield Port Loop, the second phases, which is 308 homes. Dobb Street in Wolverhampton, which is 266 homes, where we acquired the land, and we're just going through the process at the moment of developing a scheme. And of course, Friar Park in Sandwell, which is the largest brownfield housing site in the region, has been derelict for decades, which the combined authority has invested in and has gone into a joint venture with Sandwell Council, and will be on site remediating it next year. So in terms of have we delivered the intent behind the deal we have, We were set no affordable housing requirement by government for the fund, the land fund or the BLPDF fund. We have set a 20% minimum affordable housing target for our funding, which is well above the average prior to the single commissioning framework, which was 10% in the region was the average affordable housing provision. We're one of the first authorities to set a regional minimum affordable housing target for our investment of 20%, and that is working its way through on all of the schemes that I've mentioned. So that's where we are on the £53 million land fund. We have housing start dates, housing start numbers we must achieve on our individual sites, and we're working our way through those housing starts at the moment. We're well on course to be potentially, we think, over 1,000 ahead of our housing start trajectory we were given for the land fund by government when we signed the housing deal back in March of 2018. So that's where we are at the moment in terms of going through. On the land fund, we have to go through each of the housing start milestones. And as Mike said, from the first £53 million that we've deployed over the last year, we've unlocked about 4,500 new homes on brownfield sites. Now that's just from the land fund, and we can give you separate figures for the brownfield land and property development fund. And obviously the 84 million we haven't received yet, but we will again be seeking to secure 20% affordable housing on those sites, again with the same principle of intervening where the market wouldn't bring those sites forward. So absolute market failure is the clear test that Housing and Land Board and the government have set us, and all the appraisal work we do makes sure that there is genuine market failure on these sites. And I hope members of the group can see by the sort of sites I'm talking about, of which I'm sure many of you will be aware of, these are sites that have been stalled for years, often decades, that are now coming forward.
Okay. I'll hand over to colleagues and come back. I think Kathy makes a good point. Can we have a breakdown of the brownfield fund, the sites, and how much has been by borough? I'll pick up on Councillor Simpkins and Councillor Boston. Can I just also say though, Gareth, at some point, or Mike indeed, you do have to come back and reflect on the fact that we have absolute housing need in our region. What are you doing to address it?
Yes.
Steve, and then
it's what lessons have we learned with delivering the brownfield sites? How can we make it more productive? How can we make it easier for authorities to get through their brownfield sites to be developed? The other side of this is it's great to have the houses built, it's fantastic, but it's about all the other amenities that we need on there: doctors, surgeries, we need schools, we need roads to be kept up there. So we need a holistic approach. How do we achieve that with regards to the spend associated with, you know, it's great to put houses there. The other big fear for me is that affordable housing is only affordable for the first time that it's bought, and after that it goes out to the open private sector to maximise the profits. We're seeing lots of our residents come back to local authorities who want in council houses. How do we broker a partnership where we can deliver new houses for local authorities with their either in their arm's length or even their direct housing, council housing programs? That surely has got to be a big component now of what the combined authority does. We need our people to be protected and to be secured in homes at an affordable rate. Not affordable housing, there's a difference. There's a bit there, I know, but
okay, and again, if Mike and Gareth coming back up on Steve, I'm interested because you use the affordable housing figures in your briefing note to my committee. When I looked at the 2018-19 stats that you took through Housing Land Delivery Board, it really did show how shockingly low social renting was. And when you look at the levels of poverty in our region, it would suggest that we are, yes, we are investing, and yes, we are addressing numbers, but we're not necessarily addressing housing need?
Well, we have addressed the housing need. We are now working on a new scheme, which I think the first one is in Wolverhampton, which is known as the right to own. And this will be targeted to mainly the younger element, the people that can't get onto the housing ladder. And the way the scheme will work, and is working elsewhere in the country, is that people who can afford to pay a rent but don't have a deposit for a property will enable them to take a property and use that, what would have been rent, to actually constitute towards a mortgage on that property. So there's quite a lot of work done on that. And I think the first scheme, which Gareth could probably tell you, is that the March is in Wolverhampton.
But Mike, that, with all due respect, that's not social housing, and that, as Steve has pointed out, that is not going to help the families who we are leaving stagnating on a waiting list. And we know the cycle that comes out of that. If you're living in temporary housing, what that does to your child's education prospects, what that does to your health prospects. We don't seem to have an answer for the fact that we are an incredibly deprived region. You know, people can't even afford to private rent, let alone own. And quite frankly, we're increasingly finding with COVID and the breakdown in relationships and everything else, people are just going to be caught in a cycle. And what we're trying to find out in this committee is, what are your plans and what are you doing to address housing need? Can I bring Ahmed in? And then maybe
can I just answer that question? Government made, well, I don't know which government it was now, many years ago, government policy changed that social housing, as we would know it, is provided by housing associations. That's not the brief of the Housing and Land Board, I'm afraid. We are in a situation where the money that we get is designated and ring-fenced to do exactly what the Housing and Land Board are doing. The housing associations, which we are now pulling together as a consortium, if you wish, may, I hope will, address the issue that you raised, but that's not the purview of the Housing and Land Board.
But that is the purview of the combined authority to address housing need. Are you telling me, Councillor Bird, that it is not in your remit to respond to housing need in our region?
No, that's not what I said. What I said was, to answer your question, is what are we looking at social housing? The answer is no. Social housing is not within the brief of the Housing and Land Board. Our brief is for housing need, and the housing need is designated by government by the money they passport over to the combined authority. But we can't just spend it on anything that we might want to. It is and has got ring-fenced issues around all of the money that's coming in.
Okay. I think we may have to disagree on that one, but I'll come back maybe at another day. Ahmed, you've had your hand up for a while.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. And firstly, I'd welcome, on behalf of the people of Sandwell, the Friar Park development. It's definitely welcome, but I find it awfully troubling that a combined authority that was set up to carry out the wishes and aspirations of the people of the West Midlands is in some way at the mercy of diktats and orders of Whitehall, really. And I'm referring also to the figure that Gareth mentioned, around 20%. 20% is less than 80%. And I'm really concerned, like you, Chair, about the chronic lack of affordable housing that we have in our area. I don't see the difference between housing need and social housing. When we have a need for housing and a need for affordable housing, how can that not include and not be a part of a social housing settlement or a social housing plan, which is desperately needed by the people of the West Midlands, and actually will be needed far more with the challenges we're facing with regards to the coronavirus pandemic and people's jobs, etc. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Boston. I think Councillor Baton's put a question in the chat. I think it's really important we look at this, because we all know affordable housing, and I appreciate you've brought through the model for affordable rent, but affordable housing, intermediate rent, shared ownership, for somebody who is on the the nature of our economy in this region, people have 3 or 4 casual jobs, people are experiencing periods of unemployment. The COVID and the mishandling of the pandemic is going to put this region back further. We have huge challenges. I can't seem to be getting answers to the moment I know that over the next weekend we will be out having to do food deliveries to people. We had a discussion last night about the sheer horror that the fact that this is going to be November, we know that people won't be able to afford to heat their homes to keep their children locked in. What is the offer? My time in this region used to be in the days of the Regional Housing Board, and there was a very clear view that we needed to support the regeneration of our council housing areas. We needed to develop social housing. We needed to develop new forms of housing tenures that were available to all of our communities. Are you saying, or have we misunderstood, are you saying that actually the Housing and Land Board's focus is for those who actually can afford to actually go towards the market? That is your interest, market-driven housing. And then I don't know if you want to come back on that, Councillor Bird.
I can work within the parameters set down by government and set down by the Combined Authorities Constitution. They tell us, both of them, in actual fact, what the money can be used for. We might have a wish list to spend the money elsewhere, but sadly, the Constitution of the WMCA and that of government is, here's the money, that's what you can do with it. Now, I'm sorry, that's the way it is.
Okay, so Tim, can you clear up for us before I invite Councillor Simpkins in, or maybe you could check? Constitutionally, are we not as a combined authority permitted to support the development of social housing?
Chair, I think what Councillor Bird is referring to is obviously when we are allocated funds by central government, obviously we have to follow the terms of that allocation. So quite a lot of the funds that we've had, and I'm sure Gareth will explain this probably more clearly than I am, but a lot of the funds that we have come with specific requirements for specific purposes, and one of those would be the Brownfield Land Remediation Fund and that sort of thing. I mean, from my knowledge of the housing and land programme, I mean, there are a number of areas where we're working on affordable housing. We've also got an affordable housing and social housing policy now. So I think, you know, to suggest that we're only interested in the market itself is perhaps not quite right.
It's the clarity I wanted. Councillor Bird said constitutionally, the combined authority cannot have an interest in social housing. And why I'm interested is
not what I said. That's not what I said. If you listen to it, that's not what I said. I said we can only operate constitutionally. We have standing orders and directions from the combined authorities what the Housing and Land Board, the delegations, can and can't do. And we work within those parameters, whether they are by government ring fencing the money or whether it's the delegations down to the committee.
But Councillor Bird, and then I really must invite my colleagues back in. But I'm truly stunned at the moment, and I'm sincerely hoping it's me misunderstanding. The issue for me is you have chosen to make loans, you have chosen to make subsidy available to Urban/other organisations. There is no constitutional reason that you couldn't have chosen to have developed housing co-ops in partnership with local authorities. There is no constitutional reason. If you're prepared to put loan funding into a private development, why aren't you actually providing loan funding for the expansion of modular factories that bring jobs? It comes back to choices, and it feels you're making the choice to follow a development-led growth strategy rather than a regeneration place-based strategy. And I suppose that is partly what I'm trying to question. Is this a question of the policies that you're choosing to pursue, and how can these be bent to address the need of our area? Shall I invite Stephen and Ahmed back in and then come back to you and Gareth for further clarification? It might be that what we will need to do is go offline and have a deeper conversation and understanding of this, because it's been a deeply troubling conversation. Stephen and Ahmed.
Yeah, is there, Councillor Bird, an opportunity for us then to explore, to loan local authorities in partnership with the combined authority to build houses on our brownfield? Because in the forthcoming papers that have come from government about the proposed change into planning, it's going to compound our housing delivery because of all our numbers have gone up. So I think a delivery agent would be the local authority delivery arm, whether it be arm's length or direct like Birmingham City Council, for us to expand on our brownfield sites to be used in conjunction to alleviate some of the lists, the rising lists for our residents to get council and safe and secure with a good landlord, rather than with the horrors that local members have all had about the private sector. So is there an opportunity that we could expand or even to look at that? If not, could we then expand and look and talk to government to devolve that power so as we can do that?
Well, that's a matter for individual local authorities. Walsall Council is not a housing authority. We don't have any social housing, though we did the LSVT probably 20, 30 years ago now. Because we were, as many authorities then, very poor landlords. But having said that, that's a matter for each local authority to have a discussion as to whether they are A, able, and B, whether it fits in the parameters that government have outlined with the money that comes with us. Gareth will probably be able to give you a better answer than me on that ring fencing.
Okay, I want to, Gareth, let me bring Ahmed in first. And Councillor, but every local authority has a strategic housing responsibility, and we have a statutory responsibility to the homeless. So whether you continue to manage or own your own stock, you are still a housing authority in a strategic essence. Ahmed.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. And like many in this meeting, I continue to be baffled and troubled by the idea of regional devolution that isn't happening. Regional devolution on Whitehall's terms is just deeply troubling for me. And I think we've established a constitutional position that actually this is far more of a political decision than a constitutional decision. But my question was actually in relation to the figures. So Gareth mentioned 20% and how this was higher than what's been done nationally. Well, shouldn't that figure could have been higher then, couldn't it, if we related the figure itself to the need that we have here in the region, i.e. the number of people who are homeless, the number of people who are in need of social housing? It didn't have to be 20%, did it? It could have been 50, 60, 70, 80%. Is that what I understand by that? That it's at our discretion then, ultimately, and not necessarily the case that we have to do what Whitehall says. Thank you.
Gareth, would you like to come back on that before I invite Councillor Fowler in?
Yeah, please, may I come back on that, Chair? So when we signed the housing deal in 2018, the average affordable housing being provided on development sites in the region was 10%. So that's why when we went into negotiations with government, we said that one of the things we really wanted to do was to push the affordable housing provision on sites higher than what was coming forward through developments and through the Section 106 process, which is obviously led by individual local planning authorities on a case-by-case basis. So local planning authorities negotiate the affordable housing contribution developers provide through Section 106 agreements. We set a 20% target that was presented to the Housing and Land Board with evidence that articulated that it would be a challenge for a number of brownfield development sites, but it was something that we were very keen to secure, was that 20% affordable housing requirement. And when I said it compares well nationally, just to clarify my point, it's double what was being provided within the region on development sites by developers in 2018, and that no other regional authority that we are aware of has set a minimum affordable housing requirement on sites it invests in or acquires, whereas the combined authority has. And just on Councillor Simpkins' point, if I may, Chair, we do have applications coming forward through the single commissioning framework from local authority housing companies seeking to develop out sites. We have ones coming forward from housing associations seeking to develop out sites with a much higher level of affordable housing than 20%. and obviously from a whole range of developers as well. And when we take schemes to the investment board, one of the requirements of the investment board that we've set is that any scheme that comes forward, we must have the agreement of the relevant local planning authority, who obviously is the planning authority for that scheme, as it comes forward to the investment board. So all the schemes, for example, in Walsall, will have the agreement of Walsall Council officers that this is a scheme that they would support under planning and they would support going forward. Similarly for Wolverhampton and Birmingham and other areas. And we saw that with a recent scheme that went to the investment board in Birmingham. We were checking that Birmingham officers were fully supportive of the scheme and the affordable housing requirement that we put in. So just to provide some clarity, Chair, to a few of the points that have been raised.
I'll come back after Councillor Peter Fowler and then Councillor Mike Chalk.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
And we need to draw this to. Yeah. I need to bring in Aisha as well. Sorry, I'll bring. Yep.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yes, this is a little bit sort of scratching your head, actually, is that you'll hear about affordable housing, and I think it might be helpful. Some members will obviously know better than I. The difference actually between affordable housing and social housing. And Gareth, I think would be helpful just to have something that actually says this is what affordable housing is, this is what social housing is, so we can get a bit of a context of exactly what is being delivered and who by delivered. I mean, Mike is totally right in what he said, that he has to go by what the Constitution says and what its intended delivery. But I think that's where there's a bit of a gap of understanding of exactly who should be building what. And Lisa, through the Birmingham City Council, from that side of it, it'd be helpful to know from what their expectations and what they should deliver. So a clearer picture of exactly, then we can come back and say, why isn't this happening and why isn't that happening? And I guess to fill in if there's any potential gaps. And finally, I do recall that when they did a housing development in Camp Hill, which is in Nuneaton, I was amazed by the company that built those houses, because even the housing officer said, come and have a look at these, councillor. I'll be very surprised if you can differentiate between an affordable social housing and a private home. And I was looking and you couldn't tell, because they didn't look any different. And I thought that was a fantastic scheme that Nuneaton and Bedworth actually brought forward. But again, to finish off, Chair, that information would be helpful to us so we can find out who should be delivering on social housing, because that is a desperate and urgent need.
Thank you, Peter. And again, just to pick up on what Councillor Simpkins has put in the chat box in relation to that, clearly the government's reforms, we are losing Section 106. We are potentially losing some of our planning controls. Where I suppose I have an absolute concern here is we're not responding to the current crisis, let alone the crisis that's around the corner. And I'll come back at the end, but I'm finding the complacency really staggeringly upsetting, especially knowing that we're going to be seeing families again locked in to temporary housing because we don't have the supply in this region, but we have the means available to change our methods of intervention in the housing market. And that's what I'm finding really difficult. Why aren't we intervening more directly? Richard Brown and then Aisha, you had a question on homelessness also.
Thanks, Chair. It's just a question really about the planning for the future of housing, the white paper. And at the moment, I'm unclear where this combined authority stands on it. What is the combined authority's view on that white paper? Because it will affect the number of houses built. It will affect where they are built. And actually, of those built, it will affect how many are affordable. It has a direct impact on all those things. Can somebody tell me where the combined authority stands on it?
That would be really helpful. Councillor Bird?
Well, there was there was a paper that went to the Housing and Land Board. I'll ask Gareth if you could circulate it to the members of the Scrutiny Committee. That clearly, one of the first points is the combined authority are not a planning authority. And therefore that was outlined in the report, but there was a response which was commissioned by all the 7 Met leaders to make sure that government knew what we were thinking as a combined authority. I have to say, I have some great reservations about the white paper, not least of all that many of the issues there were wide and permitted development, which will put strain on local authorities to actually implement enforcement, because people do tend to not build in accordance with what their permitted development rights are. And I chair the planning committee in Walsall, and I've been on the planning committee for just over 40 years. But at the end of the day, I do think that whenever government gets in place, no matter what colour it might be, the first thing they do is tinker around with the planning system, something they don't understand. But there is now been a shorter time span for local plans. That's within the report, and the response from the combined authority points that out, that in itself will put constraints on local authorities, and as a result will lead to issues in relation to Section 106. I think Section 106 is still there, but of course what we do need to do is to look at how we can bring in the infrastructure that's required for any housing development, because that's the big hole in this particular white paper. It's all right slackening or looking what I used to call the local development orders. In other words, if you tick the box of all the things that are required on a piece of land, then you don't need planning permission. However, once the developer, whoever that might be, has done that development, they then ride off into the sunset, and the local authority picks up the bill in many cases for that fallout of doctors, schools, which was said by Steve Simpkins earlier on. Now, that is where we have to tighten the issues up. We have to make sure that the local authority are vigilant of what is required in all of that infrastructure. And that's one of the issues that has been brought out by the paper that went to Housing and Land Board today and has been sent on to government, even though the closure for that was last Thursday. I think the submission was put in. And so therefore, I think the paper can be circulated by Gareth to all of you to see what the response is from the combined authority.
Okay, that would be really helpful. Thank you. Can I invite Councillor Chalk in, and then Aisha, and then I think we need to then sum up where we are and what we're doing next in relation to housing.
Thank you, Chair. Just my apologies, first of all. I did have a lot of technical problems to start with, and I've only just joined the meeting earlier on in this part of the debate. I represent North Worcestershire, obviously, but I am a councillor for Redditch, and we do have our own housing stock, some 6,000 properties. And as from a planning point of view, as with Councillor Baird, I've been on the planning committee now for more years than I like to remember. But one of the things we used to have was a standard 40% social housing with every development. We never seemed to get that. And then when we started to look at it closely, we realised that it depended where you were in the borough, where you built. Yes, you can get 40% in a place called Feckenham, which is a village out in the middle of Worcestershire. Unfortunately, there's no land there to build on, because it's all in a conservation area. So you never got 40% down there. And then there were other parts of the town where if you could build, just it was unviable to respect that. So we sort of have a more lenient regime as to about what percentages we should have. So again, I apologise for being late for the meeting, Chair, but and hope that that's of use to somebody.
Okay. Thanks. Thank you for that, Mike. Gareth, you were.
It was just to say, Chair, that in the.
Can you also clarify as well the relationship with the housing associations, because you were kind of suggesting that you didn't have a relationship with them, but there was one starting up. And
no, we've got a very good relationship with all the housing associations. We actually have the West Midlands Housing Association partnership on Councillor Bird's Housing and Land Board. They've been with us right from the start of the housing deal, and a number of housing associations are working with us on development schemes jointly with developers. So Walsall Housing that Mike referenced, we've worked on with Lovells with a number of schemes, and there are others too the point I was going to raise just on the planning white paper is we raised within that the affordable housing issue and the fact that we are seeking significant new funding from government for affordable housing, as mentioned in the recharge document of over £400 million, that we're establishing an affordable housing delivery vehicle in the West Midlands, which was agreed in principle by the Housing and Land Board to try and fast track affordable housing on public land. And we also agreed that we would look and review at regular intervals the affordable housing definition that was agreed previously by the Housing and Land Board, all in the spirit of the issue that had been identified by the Housing and Land Board, which we wanted more assurance from government on what the planning white paper would mean for affordable housing. But I noticed we hadn't mentioned in this debate thus far the fact that the Combined Authority is seeking £400 million from government through its recharge document so that we can top up affordable housing on a number of development sites and ensure we can drive even greater levels of affordable housing than we currently are.
Okay, I'll invite Aisha in and then I'll sum up and we can move on to the next item. Aisha.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick one touching back on homelessness. So the West Midlands has a growing percentage of homelessness. Just keen to understand what steps are being taken to ensure that all measures to tackle this problem are in fact producing sustainable results.
Colleagues, Gareth, Mike. Gareth, Mike.
I didn't catch all of that question. Perhaps the contributor could just revisit it for me.
Aisha.
Of course. The West Midlands has a growing percentage of homelessness. Just keen to understand what steps are you taking to ensure that all measures to tackle this problem are in fact producing sustainable results?
Mike.
Gareth's probably the best to answer that. I do believe that that is a matter for each particular local authority. I'm not aware that there is a specific requirement in the Housing and Land Board unless I have missed something.
I'm so lost on this. You seem to keep on implying that the Combined Authority has no interest in housing need, that the Housing and Land Board is about housing numbers. I'm just baffled. And because isn't the Combined Authority in effect replacing what I would have known in my day as like the Housing Corporation, the sort of the Housing Homes and Community Agency? It's all come under the sort of parameters now of what the Combined Authority is doing in terms of housing, I thought. So if you're not directly intervening, who is?
Well, yeah, that's Gareth will answer the question, but that's not the purpose of the Housing and Land Board.
Yeah, so homelessness is led by each individual local authority.
No, we're not saying about the statutory responsibilities. Can we? It's not hard. We have said there are people who are too poor to rent, to buy. What are you doing as a Combined Authority to address the housing needs of the people, the huge majority of people within our BAME communities?
So just to be clear, that there's work under the Homelessness Task Force that is looking at tackling homelessness, and we recently secured some new funding for homelessness within the region, which I know has been identified. And there is work underway across the local authorities working with the CA to try and tackle the challenges faced by homelessness. And also I do have to just go back because, as I said earlier on, part of the work of the Housing and Land Board, we are looking at affordable housing. We've come up with a regional affordable housing definition. We're working with the housing associations and we're seeking to double the average number of affordable housing you get on development sites within the West Midlands over the norm. And we will circulate the work we did on regional affordable housing definition, which includes social housing, it includes intermediate housing, it includes discount market rented housing, it includes all those different areas that's been referred to, including what was traditionally known as social rented housing as well. So that is all part of the work we have done under the Housing and Land Board. And what we're using the funding to do is to try and leverage affordable housing and leverage other things that aren't a strict requirement of the government rules, but which the Housing and Land Board felt very strongly should be imposed alongside advanced methods of construction, which is another thing that the Housing and Land Board have imposed on developers to make sure that we can really fast track the delivery of advanced methods of construction.
Okay. Tim, you're wanting to come in, and then I will attempt to sum up.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to draw attention to the comment I put in the chat bar earlier on, because obviously it's been a wide-ranging discussion this afternoon, but I think from a statutory point of view, we've touched on constitution and statute and powers. The WMCA is not a statutory housing authority in the sense that the local authorities are. All of those powers and duties and responsibilities still remain with the local authorities, be they Met districts or the non-constituent authorities. Now, obviously, Gareth and his team and with Councillor Bird as chair of the Housing and Land Board, they work really closely with the statutory housing authorities, but we don't have all of those powers and we don't have all of those duties. So we are working in partnership, but some of the things that you've raised, Chair, quite rightly, and that, you know, we all know that they are really serious issues for the region, but they aren't all within our grasp, as it were. We aren't able to control the levers of power on all of those things, but we work with our partners. So I think that's just my contribution, just so everybody's really clear on that.
Thank you for that, Tim. I think Kathy's made a number of comments in the chat box which are really helpful, and Councillor Wild has also asked for some actual figures in terms of homelessness for each authority and the housing waiting list and temporary numbers, which I've been asking for several months, Councillor Wild. There is a report I might be able to circulate to you that I found last night. I totally get what you're saying, Tim. What I'm trying to understand, and I think where Councillor Simpkins was also coming from, is the combined authority came together and took on a number of powers and functions of other bodies and has a role in housing numbers. What we're trying to say is this is a poor region. We are hugely deprived in this region. We have families who at this rate will never get off the housing waiting list. The levels of overcrowding in, BAME black and minority ethnic communities across our region is scandalous. And what I haven't seemed to be able to find today, and it's this issue that Steve's brought up. Maybe it does come back to, it is not for Scrutiny to comment on policy, but there seems to be almost a conscious disregard for the level of need in our region and developing interventions that will address that need. And we keep on asking, what interventions are there? I sure asked it in terms of homelessness. I gave the example, very simple one, on modular housing. You could buy a factory and set one up in here, and you could be putting it up, housing up tomorrow. You could be having shipping containers and doing that up. You could be building earth houses. There are loads of options for accelerating housing supply within government rules. And what I don't understand is why the combined authority, given the huge level of need, is failing to pursue that. And that is just, I don't understand. And I don't know if we, Gareth, if your paper on the different definitions will help, but I think
happy to do that. Happy to do that, Chair. Really happy to do that. And also just to flag on your proposal, Chair, we've put in a bid to government for £50 million for advanced methods of construction to specifically help fund factories and support, which we can't do with our current funding. The current funding we have available is only loan funding to commercial premises through the Commercial Investment Fund. We do not have that same level of grant for employment, land and commercial functions. So that's exactly why, again, going back to the recharge document, we've got a £400 million affordable housing ask. and we've also got a £50 million advanced methods of construction ask, specifically to address the fact. And then just one final point on housing need, Chair, if I may, which is the housing deal number of 215,000 homes came from the objectively assessed housing need of each local authority, and collectively the local authorities pulled their housing need together and came to a figure of 215,000 homes, which is the figure the combined authority has to oversee delivery of each year. We've only got the published figures for 2018 and 2019.
Okay. Aisha, you wish to come in again, and then we really do need to bring this to a close.
Thank you, Chair. Just before you wrap up, given the youthful population of the West Midlands, what measures are you taking to ensure young people in particular are able to access the housing market?
Gareth?
Yeah, that's such an important point, and one of the reasons why we drove and developed the regional affordable housing definition in the way we did was to try and look at all the different options that are needed across the affordable housing spectrum, learning from best practice in Greater Manchester and London and other areas where they've looked at this issue of regional affordable housing, and particularly the affordable housing needed by young people. So that's one of the reasons why we specifically looked at an affordable housing in that way. And one of the points Councillor Bird made just on Help to Own was one of the things we are keen to encourage is a greater diversity of affordable housing products coming through the system than we've seen in the past. And the combined authority, through its brownfield funding, is absolutely committed. And again, this is a statement from the Housing and Land Board to increase the range of affordable housing products that are seen coming through. And again, we will continue to do everything we can through the brownfield funding we've got to leverage affordable housing supply. But we are lobbying hard and negotiating to try and get that additional affordable housing from central government, which is a key part of the Housing and Land Board's COVID-19 recovery plan that the board signed off a couple of weeks back, which was all about that we really got to drive affordable housing supply and other supply if we're going to have a COVID-19 recovery. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. I think what I will, there is something here that I think we've explored today, and it's partly Peter brought it up. You know, the definition of affordable is so wide, it doesn't actually tell you how it responds to the needs. And you know, at the end of the day, we're politicians, and you know, I have to face the mum who's living in an overcrowded masonette with 4 kids. You know, I need to be able to say, what is the combined authority's housing programme doing for that? You know, I can't say, well, constitutionally, the Housing Land Board doesn't really see it as their remit. That is not what we should be saying. I think it's comforting to hear about the £50 million advanced, the money you've applied for in the recharge document. But again, it's about, Peter again has put up, there's a fantastic factory in Coventry. We've clearly got the one that Councillor Bird was part of, which is part of the Accord Group. There is so much to build on, and we seem to be there is a housing crisis, and we seem to be moving so slowly. Can I thank Councillor Bird? I appreciate you have to go to another meeting, sir, and I appreciate the time you've given us. I think it is more than a difference in policy. I think there is a problem in terms of our overall housing system that maybe needs to be looked at slightly more by this committee. I think I would need to talk to a number of colleagues who look at homelessness across the piece. But what I will do, Lindsay, if it's okay with you, I think if Lindsay, Cathy and I, if the committee agrees, if we take this back in, I think we might need to come back and just do a follow-up session in January, probably having provided a few more structured questions, because again, it's almost like what needs to be done to address the broken system we have. And, you know, there's things that we can all do in terms of advocating for something better. So again, thank you very much, Councillor Bird. Thank you, Gareth.
Thank you.
Not the easiest or happiest of discussions. And can we move on to the next item, which is could people who've already, you've all got your hands up still, guys. I don't know if you're getting in early or it's just that you haven't switched yourselves off, but Peter and Gareth, you're confusing me, and it doesn't take a lot at the moment. So if you can take your hands down. Thanks, guys. Okay, so the next agenda item, I think we're over to Andy and Martin.
Yep.
Sorry, my iPad's gone off with my agenda on, so I'm going by memory.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks.
Hopefully there'll be a presentation coming up on the screen that we've sent across.
Yeah.
Okay.
There we go. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So can you see that, Chair?
We can.
Excellent. Let me just whisk through this quite quickly, if that's okay. But stop me if I'm going too fast or anything else. So my name's Martin Yardley. I'm the Chief Executive of Coventry and Warwickshire Local Enterprise Partnership, and Andy Williams is the Director of Business Investment and Culture at Coventry City Council. So just go to the next slide. So this is all about a gigafactory. This is what, but before we tell you what this is about, I think what's really important is to see how important the automotive industry is into the Coventry and Warwickshire area. So you can see that there's something around about 46,000 people employed within this sector, and there's 430 specialist automotive firms, including 35 of the top 50 global suppliers. And in terms of gross value added, that's £3.2 billion that this industry from the West Midlands adds to UK PLC. I think the thing that is absolutely critical to this conversation is that bit in red, which is the huge expectation with regards to cars and vans need to be effectively zero emissions by 2040, which has huge implications for the internal combustion engine and the implications that then has onto the automotive industry. So can I have the next slide, Steve, please? So what's a gigafactory? You hear lots and lots of different things, and the one we've got here is the one that Tesla are saying they're going to build. So in the UK, we are currently in discussions about what this really looks like, and it could be up to a facility of around about 5 million square feet in old money. We think the investment is around about £2 billion in total that will be required, and we think that will be employing about 4,000 people directly. And if you work on normal industrial type supply chain, that is anything between 4 and 7 people in the supply chain for each person that's directly employed. So they're huge numbers. And I think the thing I would say to you is certainly the data that we've been looking at will say that if we manage to achieve a gigafactory in the West Midlands, that will make the difference of around about 200,000 people employed in the automotive industry. So if we don't get it, the suspicions are it will go down by 100,000. And if we do get it, it will go up by 100,000. So there's these 200,000 jobs that we're talking about. It would appear that the UK want the government. There is very little battery production in the UK. There's some in Scotland, right towards the north of Scotland, which is mostly military battery. And then there's a limited supply for Nissan in the northeast. The government's ambition would appear, we hope, is to actually have a gigafactory supplying batteries in the UK in a location. So next slide, please, Steve. So this is something that you may or may not have heard of. This is the UK Battery Industrialisation Centre. That is a facility that we in Coventry and Warwickshire bid for around about 3 years ago now, and that was a national competition. And essentially what that seeks to do is to industrialise our research. And the critical thing about that is that we have lots and lots of research. Lithium batteries were invented in the UK, and where we then tend to fall over is how we then industrialise the research that we're very good at doing. The thing I'd point out to you on this is we won the competition at the end of 2017, and then we actually took final practical completion of the building by Q4 2020, which is all the equipment moved in and everything else. And we're roughly at £129 million of government funding that has now been put into that building. And it's around about 200,000 square foot, 20,000 square metres. So it is the only one in the UK. And if in terms of size, it's the only one in Europe of this type of significance. So the equipment that's inside, the building cost £23 million. The equipment that's inside cost many, many fold that, because it's the absolute cutting edge, and it's the cutting edge equipment that either the automotive industry and other industries can't justify purchasing and want to be able to do essentially practice runs with regards to this. But the key thing for us was the speed of delivery from winning the competition to practical completion. So next slide, please, Steve. So in terms of just placing, thank you. In terms of just placing it in terms of where we are. So there's essentially four. There's the two on the, you'll see the blue box. That is what we call the UK BIC. And that's the type of output, the tested output in terms of what we think UK BIC will be able to produce. The two to the left of that tend to be the research side. They tend to be the typical small scale moving into slightly more commercial research, the gram scale and the kilogram scale. And those are absolutely key. And those are what we are extremely good at in terms of Warwick University, University of Coventry University and Aston and Birmingham. They are very, very good at that type of research. And what we've got this building to do now is to actually then industrialise that. The next step is the production of these batteries for the industries that will need those batteries. And that's where the Gigafactory, the giga scale of output. And in terms of how you measure that, what you're essentially doing is saying there are so many batteries being produced, and each of those batteries have a certain amount of electrical output, and you add them all up, and that's where you get the word giga from. That's as simple as that, to be honest with you. So next slide, Steve, please. So that just gives you an idea of what's been happening in Coventry and Warwickshire. So just to give you an idea of where this splits, if you can see the words Whitley Bridge, that is the boundary between Coventry to the north and Warwick to the south. And where it says Tollbar Island to the east is Rugby. So it's quite a complicated administrative boundary. And that's what's been so challenging about it. We've identified some of the investments on there, and public investment in that slide, just within that slide, is in excess of £300 million. So my working at the LEP, Coventry and Warwickshire LEP, I've been there for 8 years, and during those 8 years, that investment has been undertaken. Every single one of those schemes that you can see have been undertaken during those 8 years. So this is a huge amount of investment, well in excess of £300 million when you add it all up. The thing that's probably even more important to that is the private sector investment within that slide is in excess of twice as much as that. So at least £600 million. And if you see the Jaguar Land Rover big red circle, which, thank you, Steve, which is there, Jaguar Land Rover have spent in the region of around about £400 million in terms of research. And they have a project there called Project Churchill. And that project is building around test cells where they will test their cars to temperatures of 100 degrees and below freezing. And there's a huge demand for those test facilities as cars get more complicated and more complex, and the speed becomes more important. So that's really important. And then if you look at the UK BIC, you can see that little red triangle there that shows you where the UK BIC is and everything else. The other thing I would point out to you is that the local authorities working working together as well, which has been really key. If you look at the one called Whitley East and then Gateway South, those are sites that are now allocated for employment use. So what we're trying to do here is to demonstrate that actually there's a very, very joined up approach to this development coming forward. We would like this development to be very much based around the electrification, very much based around new technologies going forward, and not distribution and warehousing. So Gateway South is a consent that's on site at the moment for 4 million square feet of employment land, and Whitley East is an application for a further 1 million square feet that's been allocated in the Coventry local plan. So you can see the scale of opportunity that sits just within this single slide. Next one, please, Steve. So that's where we are in terms of the need for regional action. Now, I can say all of that, and that's all very nice for Coventry and Warwickshire. But what I would say to you, which is absolutely key, is that we are absolutely in a competitive process. If government decides they want a gigafactory, and if government decides that this then goes back into a competitive process, unless we approach this as a region, we will not win. We will not win as Coventry. We will not win as Coventry and Warwickshire. We will win if we are the West Midlands region and everything else. And the reason why I say that, and I'll demonstrate that slightly further into this presentation, but it's absolutely key that we go forward as a collective, because I would say the assets in Birmingham and the assets in Dudley, Sandwell, Wolverhampton are all absolutely critical assets in terms of skill sets, supply chains, and all those types of opportunities that we need to make sure. And you just need to almost see, the way I get my own head around this is almost see that the gigafactory opportunity is the tip of an iceberg. A lot more of it sits underneath, and that's where the critical nature of a regional submission is absolutely key. So next one, please, Steve. So this kind of just reiterates the point I made earlier. This is all around green manufacturing jobs, which are absolutely key to the way we go forward. And you can just see some of the numbers in terms of the gross value added and just the opportunity that sits here. I think what I would also say to you is since we've been doing the work that we have been doing, and UK BIC was successful, and that's been built on since, we've noticed that an awful lot of businesses are now beginning to locate in Coventry and Warwickshire in particular, because of the opportunities that sit off them feeding off each other. So we have not only do we have Jaguar's headquarters, but we have LEVC, who make London taxis. Lotus Cars have actually just moved their battery engineering sector into Warwickshire. And so what I would say to you is again, just see this as something that will act as a magnet for the whole region in terms of attracting these businesses and these types of businesses into there. And the reason why I think it's really important to the region is it's fine attracting the battery thought processes, and that's absolutely fine being in one place. But a lot of the skill sets that are required to manufacture these batteries do not sit within Coventry and Warwickshire and sit within the wider West Midlands. And that is a skill set that we then need to use to continue to build on. So next slide, please, Steve. So that's the one I was talking to you before. And I know it looks like the dental record for Neanderthal man, but the big tooth in the middle is Gigafactory. The green teeth to the right are the things that we think we are very, very, very good at in terms of post battery. So it's post sales, OEM and post sales. And then you look at the supply side. But if you then look at the opportunities that sit within that entire dental record, probably the only one that we cannot really have a real conscious effort on is the mining and the extraction industries. And that's because of the nature of materials and minerals that are currently required to create batteries. That said, one of the things that's absolutely key to battery research going forward in the future is to make us less dependent upon those minerals because of the human cost of their extraction, and also the limited availability of them given where the control for those particular mines sit. So when I say Gigafactory, don't just see the tooth in the middle, see the whole dental plate in terms of the opportunity that exists for the region. So we think the bit that's going to be absolutely critical in terms of all of this is if we are trying to minimize our mining and extractions side of then recycling processing and recycling recovery is absolutely key, and that's where a huge amount of skill set sits in the wider West Midlands. So next slide, please, Steve. So this is kind of where we are, and though it's accepted that the final decision on the location for Gigafactory will be made by a private investor, that will be made in two particular parts. One, nobody's going to spend £2 billion unless they have customers, and we just happen to have people that are potential customers in this region where others don't. And the other part of that is us making it a complete story. So our role is to make sure that they see the West Midlands as the most competitive and attractive location, not only in terms of the site, which I would argue is almost like a minor part of this. It's actually having the supply chain, the skills, the ability, and this is the bit that Chair, you and I spoke about previously, is the ability to actually make sure that we're fast enough and flexible in terms of our education to take account of the opportunities that will come forward from this, because they will be fundamentally different to those people that are currently working in the automotive industry, because there's no engine. So the engine that all of us recognise is not there. So it's the retraining and reskilling of workforces, as well as adding on to all of this stuff that's so important. The other thing I would say to you is, to have the next slide, Steve. So the other thing, I'll just take me back one, sorry, I thought I had one more. So the other thing I would say to you on this is absolutely key, and this is the one that we can sometimes forget. If we are not successful in terms of achieving the battery factory, the Gigafactory, come forward in the future, it may be easier to locate manufacturing close to the Gigafactory rather than get a second or third generation Gigafactory into the UK. And the reason I say that is because the importance of the Gigafactory, as I said earlier, is about the supply chain and about the skills. So if you are, as a country, and you have got a Gigafactory in place, and there's one in Poland, it may be considerably easier, come the increasing demand for batteries as we go through the next 10 or 20 years, to just expand those factories rather than think, oh, well, we need one in the UK. So it is absolutely key that the UK gets a first generation Gigafactory, and I would argue it's absolutely key for what we all do for as a region, that we in the UK, we in West Midlands have the first Gigafactory, because the first customers for that factory will be the automotive industry. Sorry, Chair, if I've gone on, but I just thought I'd rattle through it.
I've muted. That's absolutely great. Thanks, Martin. Andy, is there anything you wanted to?
The only one thing I would add to it is that this is really one of those opportunities that is for all. This will bring jobs from low-paid jobs, low-skilled jobs, all the way to high-paid skilled jobs. A real opportunity for the FE sector across the region to ensure that we can just get a vast array of people with different competencies, different education into jobs across the whole supply chain, the value chain that Martin represented. And that's one of the reasons this is really significant.
Okay. Thank you for that. Just picking up, I suppose, on that point, and it's one clearly we've already discussed, and I appreciate my colleagues. That was a really good presentation, Martin. It's just I've at least had it several times, so I could catch up with it. What I'm keen to understand is, how ready are we as a combined authority? Are we putting in the work that's required now to prove that we are reskilling, we are retraining, that we are ready? Because again, that is always my concern, that we, before we lose those skills or we lose the people and they become more of our never-ending housing lists, how are we picking people up now? Because what you don't want is people to fall out of Jaguar Land Rover, have a period of time unemployed, and then come back in. you know, is there an actual transition plan behind the Gigafactory? Because I think, again, when we first spoke about this, my concern is we're very good at coming up with shiny, sexy things that involve men in hard hats and photo opportunities in the region. The sheer ball ache of turning a low-skill, low-paid region into something where people can afford to live isn't quite as sexy, but that is actually what we need to do. And I suppose that's what I'm interested to understand, you know, in your perspective, what, you know, is the combined authority doing enough to support the bid? What else would you be looking for? Then I'll open it up.
Do you want to have a go at that, Andy, or do you want me to?
Yeah, I can start. I mean, I think we've certainly given this a lot of thought, because I think the majority of employment is in the supply chain, and certainly as we were pulling together or contributing to the recharge document, the big thing we were talking about was a package of support that we framed moving from ICE to BEV. And that support needed to have a mixture of capital and revenue support to enable businesses to be innovative. How do they make the most of new innovations? How do they invest in capital equipment that would enable them to transition from an internal combustion engine supply chain into battery electric vehicle? We know that UK BIC, through the work that we've done, is developing a battery manufacturing apprenticeship as well, again trying to bring new skills in. The bit that we probably need to do more work on is supporting businesses retrain their workforce as well and put in specific programs for that, because those things will cost SMEs significant amounts of cash, I would have thought, and we do that at a small scale and have done that as a small scale for many years, but we're talking, the size that we're talking about is significantly bigger than that. So we've definitely started those thought processes and started to look at programs, but there's so much more that we need to be doing across the whole of the West Midlands, I think. Martin, I don't know whether you want to add to...
Yeah, if you don't mind, Andy, just a couple of things. First of all, one of the things we've, I suppose there's two. There's the Electrification Task Force, which we've created under the chair of the chair of WMG, whose name I've forgotten. But
Margot James.
Yes. So she's pulling it together in terms of everybody wanting to, everybody having the opportunity to do that. And I know we've got staff from the combined authority that are sitting on that electrification task force. The second thing is that the bid process that we will be making, I think 2/3 to 1/3, 2/3 needs to be relating to training. So we think this bid at the moment, and we are in the hands of government, we think this bid will be in the region of 600-700 million pounds. We would like 2/3 of that to be looking at supply chain and training rather than just focusing on the building, because I think the way you summed it up was absolutely right, Chair. I think if we build a shiny building and then it is populated by people who are not from the West Midlands, then we failed. It's as simple as that. And so it's really key that the bid that goes in seeks to address not only the building, but also seeks to address the training and shows how we can react to that as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Julia, did you want to come back on that question specifically before I invite others in?
Yes, thank you. Just to talk about the broader infrastructure on the region to support this. So if we go back to the industrial strategy, one of the key kind of areas of activities around the sector action plans, which are led by LEPs and by the growth company across each of the key sectors for the region. So that's kind of and that's the area where the kind of all of those jigsaw pieces come together. So all three of the LEP responsibility for those sectors is across the whole region, exactly gets into understanding these issues around supply chains, the vulnerabilities, and then within that system there are specific contributions that the combined authority can make. So as Martin and Andy have already said, we're supporting task force, and also there's an automotive skills task force as well, which is looking exactly at this issue of engaging with businesses on where are the future needs and how do we make sure that we've got the skills in the region to kind of deliver them. So, and that's quite forward looking, I think, as well, rather than just being in the immediate here and now.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Simpkins and then Councillor Chalk.
Yeah, Chair, thanks. Nobody can fail to be impressed by the presentation, what it's done. But as a Black Country representative, I really struggle with how we're going to benefit from this in the Black Country. You talk about the skills and supply chain moving forward, educational attainment, the best, it's moving in the right direction. This is going to take an absolute generational change for us to educate and upskill our people, and that will take us too long. By that time, that void will be filled by the expertise in and around Coventry and Solihull, rather than benefit the Black Country. Also, I think I'm up full support that we go through this, but I think there should be some time and effort put into hydro development rather than just putting our eggs into one basket. You know, perhaps if we could offset the Gigafactory in Coventry into the Black Country, we could look at hydro development and hydro factories. That's already been expanded on by Aston and I think in Birmingham University and a private venture. So I think that we need to be more strategic when we say that the development and the skills and supply chain will be there in the Black Country to take up the void. That's not quite right, because the evidence that I've got from our own scrutiny that's come back in Wolverhampton about our skills deficit is woeful. We're struggling to get money passported from the Combined Authority into education and skills because there's too many hoops for us to go through. It's bureaucracy for bureaucracy's sake, I think, sometimes with the Combined Authority. So we need to address them problems. We need a strategic outlook of how we move the West Midlands to a greener future, not just put all our eggs into one basket. So I will support this, but I've got caveats that I do think further scrutiny needs to be brought out of what the Combined Authority is going to do to address the skills deficit, so there's no mogul shift from north to south. And if you was to look at the deprivation key indicators across the West Midlands, you'd see that the north and the Black Country are the worst. So why do we look at that then first or after this? You know, not as I don't want to rain on the parade of anything. I think it's marvellous that we're investigating and moving forward and investing in this. But let's look strategically across the Combined Authority to address the issues like deprivation, like educational attainment and poor health. Okay. Chair, thank you.
Thank you, Steve. I'll bring in Councillor Chalk and then go back to Andy to respond to that if your hand was up, willing. Councillor Chalk.
Thank you, Chair. I'm delighted with what we've seen, and from a personal point of view or a parochial point of view, if you can't find space in Coventry, there's space the other side of the border in Worcestershire for the Gigafactory. But more important than that, if we are going to approach this as a joint effort from everybody, right across the whole of the West Midlands, what can we as a borough council, what can I go to Bromsgrove and Wychavon and Kidderminster and say, look, this is what you need to do to help get this into this area? Kidderminster is a bit farther away from Coventry than Redditch, but I'm sure that they will have skilled people or, you know, ex-carpet people, I suppose, that would want a job making batteries. So what should we be doing to help the thing for the government for us to persuade the government to do what we want?
And again, I think we've discussed this much in the session I had with you, but just really I was supposed to pick up on Steve's point that, you know, you can see clearly there is a huge expertise and strength around battery that is now coalescing in Coventry. You have the Warwickshire Manufacturing Group, you have industrial facing capability, as you say, to seize the innovation. So you actually, it takes that research to the next level. You actually have capacity and capability within your local authority, not something that is enjoyed across the region, dare I say. You know, the reality check is how can, and maybe it's more of a question for Julia, but quite rightly, Coventry will push this and should push this because that's what the elected members of Coventry are there for, that's what your communities would expect, and that's what your performance is judged on, how successful your area is. As a combined authority, We have to judge it on how does it balance and address the inequalities across our region. And it's always that conundrum. How can we make it real to those people in the Black Country? And maybe it's something we need a specific example, Julia, maybe we give to the Black Country Task Force to look at. I don't know, but maybe
if I can just jump in, I would just say that both in terms of the scoping of the Electrification Task Force, and Andy might want to say more about that, but also the Automotive Sector Action Plan that the LEPs are leading, that is explicitly looking at the cross-regional geography. So not just the 7 Met geography, but the broader 3 LEP geography, and understanding how the supply chains map across the whole region, where there are particular issues and where there are critical bits of the supply chain that, you know, map across different geographies, and how we address those individual issues. So I think it might be worth, and obviously because the LEPs are then leading on all of the sectors, pulling out the dependencies with other key sectors for the region as well. So I just think there's been some really rich heat map analysis of kind of where those employment hotspots and vulnerabilities and the actions necessary. So I think feeding that into the discussion that you suggested, particularly if you wanted to look at it from a Black Country point of view, could be really helpful. But really just to say that although Coventry and Warwickshire LEP are leading that sector action plan, all 3 of the LEPs and the combined authority are working together to make sure that those various pieces of the jigsaw fit together. So we are taking that region-wider view, and it's not being, you know, so it's not just in the context of the direct impact of the location of the Gigafactory, if that makes sense.
Fantastic. Okay, Andy, then Martin, and then I'll come to Peter.
Just make a couple of comments, really. If the projections of UK sales around electric vehicles are estimated to be grow from 1.1 million to 2 million per annum by 2040. And that's the equivalent of having around 13 gigafactories in the UK. So what we're talking about here is getting a march on the first one and landing as much initial investment here as possible. And almost, if I could describe it as the roots of the UK gigafactory production here in the West Midlands. And Coventry and Warwickshire, you know, I'm director for Coventry City Council. It's not big enough to cope with what is needed here. And we need a much more expansive land opportunity and a greater skills workforce to make this happen. And there will be ways of accelerating this on the simple basis that the UK government will not want to be left behind, and it will invest more cash within this. And we know we're having those conversations at the moment. And to respond to one of the comments around hydro, and possibly hydrogen as well. Well, this was, you know, government offered a call for 130 million around electricity and electric vehicles. If they offered a call around hydrogen and hydro, we'd take that as well and go after that and see what we could do. So I think this is about making the most of that opportunity.
No shame.
No shame. Well, as it would take it for the West Midlands as a whole. But I think the value chain slide is really important and worth having a look at. So one of the exercises that the Electrification Task Force is going to do is go through all those different elements and say, well, where are we strong across the West Midlands, or where could we be strong? Where do we lack? And how do we grow that? What's needed in terms of intervention? Is it in the, you know, is it in our colleges and FE? Is it in new institutes? Is it in our universities? Is it in reskilling and training? But where does the expertise lie? And we know that a lot of the stuff at the very front end, like the material, the raw materials, the mixing of those materials, a lot of that happens in the Black Country already, and they exist there. And we need to pull on that, because it needs to be part of our USP to attract an investor here as well. We're not just trying to attract the government investment from the public sector. We're trying to go to an LG, a Samsung and a Panasonic and say, hey, come here and locate because of all of these things. And they really don't just exist in Coventry and Warwickshire, but we do have to start somewhere, and we do have to start selling our USPs. And that's really what we've been going after. I think Martin wants to come in as well.
Yeah. So just one point, Andy's absolutely spot on. So just one point to add on to that. One of the things we probably need to do more, as we understand it, is to demonstrate to people the opportunities that are there. And the example I would give you was when we were sitting down with Andy and I both went to China, and when we were sitting down with these battery companies, one of the things they said to us that surprised us was actually one of the skill sets they required was actually from the paint industry. And that is because of the way they spray the chemicals onto the metal. And that really caught us. So one thing I would say to everybody is don't look at it as if we are trying to use the existing skill sets and that there are a much wider opportunity, particularly around the chemistry and the chemicals that sit within this system. And that's when I think that we can actually start benefiting the Black Country more in terms of, as Andy said, the actual creation of these chemicals and the applying of these chemicals to particular materials. I think that's really, really key. And in terms of just in terms of the whole offer, we are in a national competition. Absolutely agree. And the North East will do what they do, and they always do what they do. And there's all the political machinations of red lines and all that type of stuff. However, we are the best at this. We won UK BIC in a competition because we were the best to get that there. So we have to build on the fact of that success, and we will do that if we show all of the skill sets that exist around us, not just relying upon the suitability of the site and the bits we've done around there at the moment. It's much, much bigger than that for us to win.
So in some ways, what's also going to be important is picking up on Steve's note of caution, is actually that the combined authority manages to inspire confidence across the Black Country and other areas that actually we can turn this corner. Councillor Fowler.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, a little bit of caution from my side, especially as being a former Warwickshire County Councillor and was on the LEP for a little while. I don't think I was there with Martin, but can't be sure. But hearing what Steve had said, Chair, about his concern about Wolverhampton, which is understandable, but the same situation is that Coventry and Warwickshire have been bidding for that area, where it could have actually been the other way around. So I think, as Mike Chalk mentioned, and I think yourself, Chair, was it's about working within the West Midlands Combined Authority for a joint effort, and we're talking about the supply chains as well throughout the West Midlands. So that will be interesting. Sorry, Chair, I've just got some come to the door. And I'm interested to find out as well, you mentioned, Martin, about customers. I'd be interested to know, obviously you mentioned the automotive industry, but I'd be interested to know what other suppliers are out there, because it's a lot more than just the car industry, I think. And that's where I think it comes in, hopefully, when we're looking at if the Gigafactory is or ends up in Coventry, it's then looking for all avenues of the West Midlands Combined Authority. So Wolverhampton, Worcester and what have you all get to hopefully try and get a share of the pie for retraining and investment. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, and thank you, Andy, for your point about Wolverhampton. Richard, I'm presuming you're wanting to come in to do the big hurrah for Coventry, but maybe you'll exercise some scrutiny as well. I don't know.
Of course I will, Lisa. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, I am really excited about this, but I'm actually really excited about it because it is the whole combined authority region, and actually wider than that. And the other thing that I'm really excited about this is, we've touched on this before, we are a young region, and this is not something that potentially that is for old gits like me, but it's for young people. There's huge opportunities for them to be able to train on this one. So that's what really excites me. And Martin knows that when he dangles a carrot in front of my nose, I get really impatient about it because I want to grab it. So can I ask a question around, when do I get all this? When do we get all this? What's the timing? What's the next steps for this? I assume you've got a timing plan in mind. Could you share it?
Thank you. Thank you, Richard. I'm very restrained.
It was, wasn't it, for me? Yeah.
Shall I come back on those, Chair, those 2 points? So just to cover Peter's point first, I think you need to think that batteries will be a fundamental part of the industrialisation of the UK in a number of years' time, and their importance to the UK will continue to get more and more important as the technology and the chemistry gets better. The reason why we are working with the automotive industry is that's where the immediate demand is. And that immediate demand has been generated by government legislation that says zero carbon by 2040. And we know there's discussions going on at the moment that saying zero carbon by 2035. Now, that is huge in terms of the pressure on the automotive industry. We are incredibly fortunate in Coventry and Warwickshire to have the headquarters of Jaguar Land Rover. Incredibly fortunate. So that gives us access to their strategy teams, and that gives us access to the way they are hopefully looking at their strategic review we know they are undertaking at the moment. And certainly I've had the opportunity to sit down with the chief executive of Jaguar Land Rover and the new chief exec on 3 occasions, and I understand how important electrification is to him. Great. That said, WMG, Warwick Manufacturing Group, are currently focusing on batteries for shipping. They are also focusing on aircraft, which makes me very nervous, but that's absolutely fine. But they're focusing on that. And as you've said, and certainly as Bob mentioned earlier, the thing that's absolutely key for us is just to see this as just the opening of the box, because once we get known as the region that can do this, other opportunities will come our way, and certainly our experience of this is that that other private sector companies will gravitate. That it would just act as a magnet to all of those industries. Just see automotive as being the first part, and the reason why I say that is that once a battery becomes less than 20% efficient, it's no good for your car. So we've got 2 choices: we throw it in the bin, which I would say is insane, or we think about whole life batteries. So at a time when we are trying to reduce fuel poverty and why are we not going to be using those batteries to be using for storage, for housing schemes, so we can draw down power when it's cheap, store it and use it when people need it. Look at batteries as whole life. Cars are just the first part of it, and they're just the first industry involved in it. In terms of Chair, in terms of Richard's question, I think that's completely unfair. But then I'd expect that from him as much as anything else. In terms of timing, we are in the hands of government at the moment. We are hoping that the CSR actually happens, and we understand that the CSR will contain, and we're hopeful it will contain, a statement around Gigafactory. What I would say to you on that is we need to be immediately ready, because our experience with UK Big was they announced the money and then the competition almost immediately started. So we need to be using this opportunity now. When we've been speaking to major car manufacturers, they are saying they will need the generation of batteries coming out of this Gigafactory by 2025 and 2024, 2025. And you think, oh, that's ages away, but we've got to build the thing yet, and we've got to get the equipment into it yet, and we've got to do all that type of stuff. And they will want it coming off the production line in less than 5 years' time. So it's a 4-year window in terms of when they need their batteries to do that. So where we are on that timing is we know a strategic review will be undertaken with Jaguar Land Rover either by the end of this year or early next year. They will also be announcing who their key battery providing partner will be. We need to speak to them and get them to come. And then we need to coordinate that activity around that. And it kind of brings me back to the point that Andy raised, which was that's not just the site, because that's a challenge, but it's not the whole story. The whole story is just being able to point at the workforce. Because if we can show the workforce and how that workforce are going to be trained and educated, that will make it so much easier to get them in. And certainly our experience when we did UK Big, we won the competition and then we had nobody to put in the building because we didn't have the skill sets. So the universities have generated those skill sets and they've been brought in from across the whole country. Now, that's fine for a research establishment, like UK Big. It's a bloody disaster for Gigafactory if we have to suck the skills in.
Okay. I'm really conscious. Mike and Peter, I think your hands are still up from previously. Julia, is your hand up?
Yeah, it was
no,
only just...
another question, please.
Just to say very briefly on timing, so the spending review's been confirmed for the 25th of November. It's going to be a 1-year spending review for revenue and it will set a 1-year envelope for capital, but they have said there will be wiggle room for multi-year capital announcements where there's operational need. So really just to say the reason why this was in the region-wide recharge document as a critical thing was because it's ready to move relatively quickly. We've been pushing it hard, as Martin and Andy have said, in the spending review conversations, and yeah, so we're doing everything we can to get it mobilised as quickly as possible and to push the government timetable as quickly as possible.
Okay, thank you for that, Judy, and I'll come back to you, Mike, in a minute. I think just one of the things that I think at times the combined authorities' potential is underplayed is the power to convene. And what I think is really important there is that we actually get cross-cutting understanding across this region, so that if somebody from Bays speaks to somebody in Wolverhampton or somebody in Dudley, they understand the benefits, because that's, unless we have been able to sell it, one of the things when Martin said about the 2025, we should be telling every 11-year-old the story of the battery and how the move to electrification is going to make the difference. Now, to me, when we talk about lifelong learning and we talk about the skills pathway for the combined authority, that's where we need to start, because if we start with the 11-year-olds now, they will be taking the right subjects and following the right apprenticeship lines to have employment in there. They will also be challenging their parents to retrain. Yeah. And, I think this is always where I come back to with the skills. If you're going to do something like a Gigafactory, you have to look at which generations you're targeting, and it will come back into that school factor. And that's where convening across the different local authorities is absolutely essential. I think, Andy, you're sending your apologies, which is absolutely fine, love. I'm sure your members in Coventry are really, really important. Good luck with your members panel. Mike, last point, and then we are definitely going because we've got everyone's leaving.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Very quickly, I obviously didn't frame my question very well. Literally, what can we do now to help with the debate, and what can we do once the competition starts? I mean, is it just writing to our MP, or is it, or can we sort of, raise banners in Westminster, or what can we do to help?
I'll answer that really quickly. Support the bid, and what I mean by that is we will come to you and we will ask for things. So we are actively engaging with all the MPs now, and I think the chair summed it up really well. We all need to say the same thing, and that's for us to provide you with the information so we can say the same thing. I think when I first came to the West Midlands, the reason why the North West used to win everything was because whatever happened under the skin, the veneer was always one story. And we need to make sure that in the West Midlands we do that rather than fighting between ourselves. And actually, there's no harm provided the outside world doesn't see us fighting between ourselves. So what I would say to you, Mike, is a single story. And when we then come to you for help, we make sure you know what we need you to say.
And then just in the very, very short term, between now and spending review on the 25th of November, we are working up, and we will with Martin and Andy, work up a script on all of the spending review asks, so that any partner, MP, anybody in the region will have the kind of core messages that it might be useful either to deploy publicly or in any engagements they might have with relevant ministers, MPs, civil servants.
So that is really good in terms of management process. I take you back to then the delivery on this process and where we put some of our if the Gigafactory is an absolutely, which it seems to be an absolutely essential thing for this region, we have to have cross-cutting agreement of how we develop that skills and learning pathway. And what I love about this region, and what I love about the Black Country, is the sheer passion of the representatives of all parties on how they feel for this region. We need to harness that and make it real for people, so that the story is being given to the 11-year-old, and so that the climate striker actually sees in Birmingham getting a gigafactory, the Birmingham, Coventry, slip of the tongue there.
I'm a Brummie, I don't mind at all.
Yeah, I think I just get shot by a few people there. That there is something in it for them. And what I would like, Julia, is given we've got the automotive and electrification task force and the value chain Andy reference, I think that'd be a really lovely practical walk through that as to what does it really mean. So rather than the black task, what I don't want the Black Country Task Force to be is we need more money or this is the problem. What we need to be doing is, so what programs are you now going to shape to make sure the shiny Gigafactory delivers in this area? And I think it'd be really good to just, if we almost keep this going as our kind of case study that we can see if we can change as a region.
And I think potentially also bringing this skills task, the automotive skills task force as well, just to share what they're doing would be helpful.
Yeah. No, I think that'd be really good, because again, one of the things picking up on the Northwest, yeah, I mean, every time I come back to this region, our capacity to shoot ourselves in the foot never ceases to amaze me. Okay, colleagues, I'm conscious we are running over. Martin, is there anything else you need from us today?
No, I think that's covered everything. Thank you very much for the time.
If there's anything this scrutiny committee can do, Martin, please do call on us. We'll pick up with Julia how we can try and feed through where the benefits of the Gigafactory can feed into the Black Country and how we harness real measurable opportunities now.
I mean, what we would probably like to do, if you're okay with this, is when we start getting the information together and we get a script together, actually for you guys to have a look at it for us and say whether you think it does what it should do. That's where I think scrutiny is really important.
Yep, more than happy. Type of thing. Yeah, more than happy to do that. Again, that, you know, yeah, we can see it through the lens of various people.
And I think if I may say, Chair, what Martin's saying there, as we've said, as you've heard Martin from Wolverhampton and everywhere else, if it's going to end up, which it sounds like it's going to be in Coventry, it sounds like the whole of the West Midlands, I guess, wants a bit of the cake, a bit of a slice, you know, and that's the positive story that goes around the West Midlands. It's located there, but we're all benefiting, suppliers and this, that and the other from all around. Thank you, Chair.
It's how we anchor it. And thanks for that, Peter. Really helpful. Okay, colleagues. Thank you, Martin. And thank you, Andy, even though he's left. Brilliant.
Thank you.
Transport and Scrutiny Subcommittee minutes. Kathy.
Thanks, Chair. If I just draw your attention, the first set of minutes were there's very little in them. It was the first meeting of the committee and was very report heavy. The second set of meetings does contain a number of recommendations. So in particular, page 3, page 4 and page 5 are the recommendations that we're asking committee to support going forward. Just wanted to perhaps draw your attention particularly to the recommendations around the supported travel policies. It was acknowledged very strongly by the committee and by the portfolio holder that we need to look at other supported policies. However, with the current financial envelope that we have, maintaining what we have has to be the priority. So going forward, we are recommending a deep dive into looking at alternative models from elsewhere in the world around alternative ticketing and alternative policies that we might be able to adopt regionally, which will support the concerns that the committee had. But other than that, happy to take any questions if people have them.
Thank you, Kathy, and that sounds really, really good, because again, this is one of the things I'm keen Scrutiny does. We are overview and scrutiny, and in part, if we can drive innovative thinking to close financial minefields, all the better. Colleagues, any comments, any concerns, any thoughts? No?
No, silence is golden.
Yep.
Yes, I wanted to ask very quickly, Catherine. I noticed in there it talked about on transport about protective gear, because there's still a great concern that I still hear. My wife doesn't drive a car and she goes on public transport, and she tells me about the great concern that she has that people are still not going on to public transport wearing a mask. And I feel sorry for the bus driver, because he or she put potentially their life in their hands if they can question a certain person, and it can go the wrong way. But we're seeing people wearing masks and also with it under their nose, or actual fact, not even wanting to wear a mask, and get very, very grumpy and very cross with the driver if he points or she points it out, or even if other passenger points it out. And I'd be interested, finally, any conversations that happened with the young people or the young West Midlands Combined Authority.
Thanks, Councillor Fowler. Just picking up on the PPE, yes, we flagged it up that people raised the same concerns as yourself, but also in relation actually to the protection of workers, because staff have the right to be able to work in a safe environment. So that was very much flagged up, and we were assured that this is absolutely on Transport for West Midlands radar, and where they know there are particular routes that are that compliance is low, then those routes are targeted for additional work by Transport for West Midlands. And again, that I guess that'll be picked up at the next transport committee that Kath chairs. In terms of young people, the discussion was really around the supported travel policies. And that's really where we were saying that the envelope that we have, it will be challenging to maintain what we have at the moment. And that is why we need to start to look at some innovative options that might be existing in other parts of the world to bring that back. So there will be a deep dive into that, because we absolutely recognise that for young people who've been most adversely affected by COVID, that the financial pressures on them will be huge, along with people who are having to go out to seek jobs now. So you've got an additional impact, and how can they be supported? So that we need to do that deep dive, and that will happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks. And again, I've, having spoken and spent time in FE, a return of the educational maintenance allowance is viewed by many who teach sixth formers and college students as something that would be hugely beneficial. Okay, colleagues, there'll soon be none of us left. Lindsay, the forward plan, have you still got your voice, my love, or has that left you?
Chair Lindsay has sent a message to say she's had to leave the call, but I think, Dan, are you picking it up?
Dan, are you picking it up? Yeah. Thanks for that, Dan. And colleagues who are new to the committee, I've attended now 2 years of the budget workshop, and I can honestly say it's taken me the 2 years to actually get anywhere near to understanding the budget. It is an extremely helpful session to be able to go through with officers to actually understand the different makeups of the different funding packages. So I do recommend, if you're able, to try and make the time for that meeting. Okay, I think we're now on to any other business. Somebody remind me, because I've lost my agenda. I'm sliding through my iPad.